3 years ago, I, 30M, had tried to get my brother, 35M, to call off his wedding after I had discovered his fiancée, 33F, cheating on him, but unfortunately, nobody in the family paid any heed to what I said and they got married anyway. On top of that, they even got the family to cut me off by branding me as a jealous liar who couldn't stand to see my brother happy. Since then, I've had absolutely no contact with my family and they didn't make any attempts to get in touch with me either, until recently. Couple of days ago, they showed up because obviously, my brother was getting divorced and they needed me to testify because he didn't want to pay child support. However, I have flat out refused to help them and now, I'm being called heartless and selfish this time. On one hand, I feel pretty self-satisfied that I'm getting to turn them down and I feel like this is the closure that I needed. But on the other hand, a lot of my friends have told me that I'm going to regret this in the future because this is the one chance I might get to mend my relationship with my family. And if I reject them now, I might never get this chance again. So I'm quite conflicted on what to do, Wibta, if I didn't testify in family court in favor of my brother. And now, for those of you who would like to know more details, here's the full story. My brother, let's call him Mickey, and his fiancée and our wife, let's call her Nina, had been together for 2 years when they got engaged. I wasn't particularly close to Mickey, never really had been because we had a very intense sibling rivalry growing up, and that kind of got in the way of our relationship as brothers. Even as adults, I constantly found myself competing with him, even subconsciously. The sad part was that my parents never did much to discourage it either. So even they were aware of the fact that I didn't like my brother much and I resented the fact that he was treated better than me just because he was doing better than me. To be fair, back then, I was kind of naive, and I believed that at least family shouldn't judge you on the basis of how you're doing in life. They should have some degree of impartiality, especially when it comes to siblings, but of course now I know that it's all rubbish. People judge you for how successful you are, no matter what, and that includes family. Anyway, back then, I didn't know all these things and I didn't know how to handle stuff tactfully. I would just say whatever came to my mind in that way. My parents realized that I had always resented my brother because even though I hate to admit it, he had been better than me at certain things. Unfortunately, these certain things were the only things that counted for my parents, since he was good at math and science and stuff and started working for a growing tech company right after college, which meant that he was also making big bucks even though he was competitively younger than his colleague. It wasn't surprising, he was pretty bright and with time, his career graph only went up. On the other hand, I was not doing so well for myself. I had chosen to pursue a degree in literature and try my hand at being a writer. I dropped out in my second year because I got depressed after getting to know that I was probably not as good a writer as I had been told right from my childhood. When I was younger, I was pretty mediocre at most subjects, but writing was where I really shined and I would win all sorts of competitions and stuff. So at least that way, when we were younger, I was at par with my brother because I had my writing skills to compete with his medals for his projects and stuff like that. However, after I dropped out of college, I started trying to strike out on my own somehow and tried my hand at being a freelance copywriter. I was barely making enough to survive on my own, while my brother was doing exceedingly well and had even started paying back our parents. Naturally, some sort of comparison was bound to happen, and every time that the family would get together, my parents would make it a point to remind me that I needed to take my life more seriously, start doing something more respectable as a job, and every lecture about my life always ended with them comparing me to my brother, telling me that I should take a leaf out of his book or some other equally annoying stuff like that. More often than not, I would end up starting a shouting match with them whenever they would say stuff like this, telling them that they were being terrible parents by comparing me to my brother for no reason and that I was tired of them, pulling the same stuff over and over again right from my childhood. It was the same old routine. We would fight, we would stop speaking to each other for a couple of weeks, but then, they would reach out to me again and we would try to reconcile. And then, of course, Mickey got engaged to his girlfriend of 2 years. I had met her a couple of times when she had visited the family while they were dating. She seemed nice enough. Even during the time that they were engaged, she seemed like a good person, but then, about 2 weeks before the wedding, my family hosted a dinner party at our house, and even though Mickey and I don't get along in person, we had always tried to be able to each other for the sake of appearances. I had been an active part of all the events for the wedding, but I wasn't really interested in them, so at some point, I decided to go out for a smoke. And I still regret the fact that I did so because that's when I saw Nina making out with one of my younger cousins, Jacob, 27M. My parents didn't know that I smoked back then, so I had to walk a little distance away from the house, and when I saw Jacob's car, I was a bit confused because he had said that he was going back home. So I decided to take a peek in, to try and figure out what was going on, and that's when I saw them together. I don't know who was more shocked out of all three of us, but I immediately stubbed out my cigarette and started walking back home without even turning back. Once I was back, Nina walked in a couple of minutes later and Jacob was nowhere to be seen after that. I'm assuming that he finally actually went home. Luckily, everybody had been drinking, and nobody had noticed that all three of us had been absent, so there was no question of anybody asking us what was going on. That night, I didn't say anything to my brother because I hadn't processed anything fully myself. I was still confused as to what I had just seen and I went back home pretty quickly after that, but Nina kept messaging me throughout that night, begging me not to tell Mickey anything about what I had seen. She said that she had only made out with Jacob once, the time that I saw them, and she regretted it a lot, and that it would never happen again. She said that she didn't want me to ruin her marriage, that she was fully committed to Mickey, and that she would never make a mistake like this. All she wanted me to do was keep her secret. That night, I thought about everything, and I decided that I was going to have to tell Mickey about what I had seen because even though we were not exactly the best of friends, I owed him this. As his brother, that was the least I could do for him, so I asked him to meet me for lunch the next day and I told him everything. He looked shocked and hurt, and didn't respond immediately. He just said that he was thankful that I had told him the truth, and then he went back home. After that, I don't know what I was expecting, but I was definitely a little shocked when nobody reached out to me for a couple of days. And then, I was totally confused when I realized that everybody from the family had blocked me everywhere about a week before the wedding. I had no idea what was going on, so I decided to try and visit my parents. But they refused to even open the door, and I was left with no other choice but to visit Mickey himself because I was sure that he had something to do with this. And he definitely did open the door, but it was only to insult me. As soon as he saw me outside, he started making nasty faces at me and asked me to leave. I was very confused by his behavior because the last time that we had spoken, he had been thankful to me for being honest with him. Now, though, he was singing a different tune and told me that he knew that I was just trying to ruin his relationship with Nina because I was a miserable person myself and that's why I had cooked up this horrible story about her and Jacob, just to create drama out of nothing. It was extremely hurtful that he would even say something like this, but I knew that Nina had probably convinced him that I was lying, so I didn't respond to him since I knew that there was no talking to him anymore. I turned around and left and later on that day, I received a message from my parents who had unblocked me, only so they could tell me that they didn't want me to reach out to them again because I was just a miserable and jealous liar, who was trying to ruin my brother's life and marriage simply because I didn't have nothing of my own and he was doing so well in life. They said that they had always known that I was resentful of my brother because he was so successful but out of my way to make up such horrible lies about his wife and claim that she had been cheating on him, just so that they would call off the wedding. They told me that I was being disgusting and they wanted nothing to do with me anymore. It was pretty obvious that Nina had played them and they actually believed her and not their own son, so I had nothing to say to that. For the next 5 years, I would have nothing to do with my parents or my brother or the rest of my family. To them, I was always just going to be somebody who had tried to ruin my brother's marriage simply because I was insecure. There was nothing that I could do about the image that they had of me, and I was tired of trying. So I just let it go and the past 5 years had been difficult in the beginning because I was really upset about what was going on with me and my family. I suffered from depression in the beginning, but I eventually got better. And now I'm actually doing decently for myself. My work as a copywriter is paying better now since I've spent quite a few years as a part of the industry and I'm a better known name now. I'm good with whatever I have, and I don't even miss my family that much because I've come to see how toxic they were to me. So recently, when they showed up at my house, asking me to help them out and testify for my brother in family court, I straight up refused. I don't think that I owed anything to them, after everything that they had said to me and the way they had treated me since forever. And like I had mentioned at the beginning, my friends believe that I'm going to regret this, so they do think that I should give it a chance. They believe that I should at least talk to my parents and my brother and try to clear the air instead of acting like this. My family also hasn't left any stone unturned to make me feel guilty about my decision. They have been sending me messages and emails constantly, telling me that I'm being heartless and selfish, and also that they had their reasons for cutting me off and believing Nina over me back then. And honestly, I can kind of see that point, as much as I hate to admit it. Like I had mentioned in the beginning, I did have a tendency of going off on my parents whenever they would compare me to my brother. So naturally, my parents believed that I really hated and resented Mickey. Which is why when Nina told them that I was only making up these awful stories about her to ruin his life, they were bound to believe her. I guess I have already mentioned that I used to get into shouting matches with them every time that they would try to compare me to my brother, and I'm not saying that they were right, but the things that I would say about them and Mickey, they were not very nice either. So I don't really blame my parents for believing Nina back then, and also I didn't exactly try to fight back for myself either. I just let it all go, so naturally, they did not try to reach out to me for the next 5 years either because they believed that I had been lying, until they found out about Nina's affairs. Anyway, this also factors into why I'm feeling guilty about everything, because I really do think that we could have solved everything as a family if all of us had made an effort, but none of us did. And of course, that includes me, which is why I'm feeling kind of bad about this. I also can't get what my friends said out of my head, about this, probably being my only chance to mend my relationship with my family. I know people have a lot of things to say about how they can go on without their family, especially when they're as toxic as mine, but I keep having this feeling that I'm making a huge mistake. So I really need to know, Ida for refusing to help my brother by testifying in his favor in court? Update 1. I've given this situation a lot of thought and I've decided that I'm not going to be testifying for Mickey. I don't need to do that. I don't even need to repair my relationship with my family because for the past 5 years, I've gotten along just fine without them. And I am sure that I can say the same for them as well. They wouldn't even get in touch with me if it hadn't been for the divorce and the child support thing right now. Because Mickey and Nina have been in the process of getting a divorce for the past couple of months, so it's not like they didn't know that I had been telling the truth about Nina back then. They knew, they just didn't think it was important enough to reach out to me. Until they needed my help, that is. Mickey basically just caught Nina texting Jacob one day about a couple of months ago, and that's how he found out about the affair. Nina insists that the affair has only been going on for a year and it's only because she had been feeling neglected by Mickey because he had been focusing too much on work. But then a couple of weeks ago, they had a court-ordered paternity conducted on their 1-year-old son, and as it turns out, it's not Mickey's son. Obviously he has refused to pay child support after the divorce, but Nina insists that he continue to support his child financially because for the past 1 year, he has been acting as the father of the child and not Jacob. And here is where I come in because Mickey and my parents want me to help them out to prove that the affair with Jacob had been going on for a lot longer than just 1 year. It has been going on since before they had even gotten married, and they need me to testify against Nina so he can get out of paying child support because it's obvious that Jacob, being the real and biological father, has obviously had contact with both Nina and the child, so now he needs to step up and be the father. It's a whole thing and it's honestly kind of complicated, but the bottom line is that Mickey and my parents have known about Nina's affair with Jacob for the past few months, so they knew that I was telling the truth, and they never bothered to get in touch with me. That's what I realized in the past few days, while I was thinking about this situation. Eventually, I decided that I did not owe them anything. I'm done with them and I can just stay away from them the same way that I have for the past 5 years. I haven't replied to any of their desperate messages or emails. I don't even feel the need to do that. But I have spoken to my friends about this since they were the people encouraging me to speak to my family and try to clear the air. Of course, they had my best interests at heart. They did not want me to have any regrets. I felt like I needed to talk to them about this as well, so I told them about my decision, and I could tell that they were not exactly on board with it, but then I explained it as well. I didn't really owe them an explanation, but I offered it nevertheless because for the past 5 years, after I had the falling out with my family, they were the only people who have been by my side, and I'm really grateful to them for that. So anyway, I told them all about how I had been treated in the past by my family and how toxic they really were. They had a basic idea of things, but while speaking to them this time around, I really went into detail. I never really talked about it much because it was way too personal, and I hated reliving everything, but I felt like I had to tell them so that they could understand exactly how deep everything was for me. I told them all about the insults and stuff when I had told my family the truth about Nina, and then, finally, I told them that the only reason my family had gotten in touch with me right now was because they needed my help. They did not actually value me as a person, and they never will, because they have known that I was telling the truth for a few months now, and yet, they never bothered to apologize to me for their behavior. As a matter of fact, even now, they haven't exactly apologized to me. They have just gotten defensive, and they even kind of had me fooled for a second because I was actually considering their point of view. But at the end of the day, they should have believed their son over Nina, and they didn't. So now, if it costs them, it costs them. I can't help it. I had tried to warn Mickey and my parents, but they didn't care about it back then, and instead, they insulted me and cut me out of their lives. It would be wrong of me to go back to these people, and I don't want to hurt myself like that anymore, which is why I'm choosing to stay away. After I spoke my heart out to my friends, they told me that they were obviously going to support me in whatever I chose, and now that they know the entire situation and exactly how I feel about it, they know that I've made the right choice for myself. So everything is good among all of us, and I'm really glad about it. Update 2. So it's been 2 weeks since my family first showed up at my house, trying to get me to help them out. After that, since I did not respond to any of the messages or emails that they sent me, so they took it upon themselves to reach out to me once again today. It was the weekend, so I was spending the day at home, and around the afternoon, the bell started ringing nonstop. Obviously, when I looked out, it had to be my family, and I decided that I was going to pretend that I was not even at home, so I just let the bell ring for a couple of minutes, but then, instead of leaving, my father started yelling and said that he knew that I was at home and I needed to talk to them. I don't know how he figured it out, but anyway, I still did not reply. For a couple of minutes, my father just kept yelling from outside the door and telling me to open the door, but I did not even move. Eventually, he and Mickey started pushing against the door with all their might. And I was afraid the door might break, so finally, I had to get up and open the door. By then, I was already pretty annoyed because I had made it very clear that I wanted to be left alone. And I really did not want to have to call the cops because I live in a nice neighborhood, and also, I just didn't want to have to deal with the trouble of going through that. So I opened the door, and I made it very clear to them that I did not want to speak to them, and I had already made up my mind, I was not going to be helping them out. It wasn't a personal grievance, at this point, I just wanted to stay away from them. And they needed to respect that, because showing up at my house was not going to get me to change my mind. If anything, it was only going to make me even more upset with them. My parents did not say anything, but Mickey told me that he really needed my help because he did not think it was fair for him to have to pay child support for a kid that was not even his. And if I could help him out, I really should do it because after all, we are family. I burst out laughing at that point because, for 5 years, we have been anything but family. And all of a sudden, just because they need my help, we are family and I need to fulfill my duty. I told him very curtly that we couldn't just pretend to be family when it was convenient for them, and I don't consider them family anymore, so they could just get out of my sight now. I guess they didn't like my tone, because my parents started losing their minds as soon as I said that. My dad started yelling at me, and my mom told me that I had no right to speak to them that way because in spite of everything, they were still my parents, and they had raised me, so I owed them everything. Naturally, I fought back, and within a couple of minutes, we were caught up in a shouting match once again. If it hadn't been for Mickey, we probably would have gone on for a really long time, but, thankfully, he got both of them to stop. Then, he turned to me and literally started pleading with me, telling me that he really needed my help and that he knew that he hadn't exactly been the best brother in the past, but he would owe me big time if I helped him out this once. He told me that he didn't even want kids and it didn't seem fair for him to financially support his cheating life, and a child that didn't even belong to him, and that I was the only one who could prevent this injustice from going on. It sounded very dramatic, but I knew that he was desperate and was actually counting on me. At that moment though, after the fight that I had just had with my parents, I literally had no interest in helping any of them, and I just told them to go away or I would call the cops. Then I shut the door and eventually, they did leave. I don't know if I did the right thing or not, but I just hope that they leave me alone after this because I really don't have anything to say to them. I do feel bad for Mickey. I think that if our parents had been better as parents, we might have had a different sort of relationship altogether. I'm not saying that he himself is perfect and had no part to play in any of this, but honestly, I can't help but feel bad for the situation that he is in right now. If he had just listened to me back when I'd warned him, he would have been able to avoid this entire situation. Even today, I think that it was our parents who ruined the entire situation for him because he might have been able to get me to agree to help him out if our parents had not behaved so badly with me. Anyway, the damage has already been done. And while I really hope that he gets out of paying child support because honestly, speaking from a strictly moral point of view, I would not like it if Nina got him to pay child support legally. She doesn't deserve it. I think she's the worst and I detest her even more than I dislike my parents. And that's really saying something. Besides, ethically speaking, it would not be right for Mickey to have to pay child support, and I stand by that. So I'm definitely not going to be helping him out, but I do hope that things work out for him now. Update 3. Hey. So it's been 3 months since my last update and I know that I haven't been active here, but honestly, there hasn't been anything going on worth talking about. My parents did try to reach out to me several times, but unfortunately, they did not apologize to me. They would only send me emails telling me that I was making a huge mistake by refusing to help my brother out and that they were ashamed to call me their son, as if that was going to help Mickey out. In their emails, they were constantly just putting me down, and after a while, it got old, so I stopped reading them. It's not that I hadn't tried to block them. I definitely would do that, but they would create new accounts after a while, just to get on my nerves. Anyway, I didn't particularly care about that, so it was easy for me to ignore. And eventually, I got busy with my work again, so I was not really bothered with any of this, and the only way that I was hearing about my parents and Mickey's custody case was through a cousin, whose mom is close to my parents. I haven't been in touch with most of my family, but my cousin and I have always gotten along well, so she has been keeping me updated. And last week, I found out that Mickey won't be having to pay child support because after a lot of back and forth, Jacob has decided to step up and be a father to his child. At first, he wasn't been ready to commit, but Nina made it very clear that if he did not step up and start being a dad, then she would leave him. And of course, he had been in touch with her all along, and he had also met his biological son several times, just as my brother had suspected. So he did have a relationship with his son, he just didn't want to commit to anything. But I guess the idea of losing Nina scared him, so he finally agreed to her terms. And from what I'm guessing, they are going to get married as soon as Nina's divorce is finalized. They are trying to hurry up, so they've started agreeing to all of Mickey's terms, but I can already tell that this is not going to end well for Nina, because which relationship in the world has worked out well after an ultimatum? Anyway, that's going to be her karma, and I couldn't care less about it. I'm happy though, that Mickey is getting out of this mess. I hope that someday, at least the two of us are able to reconcile. But I don't think that as long as my parents are around, they are going to let it happen. Anyway, it doesn't matter to me much, I'm happy with my life and these things don't affect me anymore.